And that's what you're going to learn today. We're going to talk about that, how to take your strengths and your abilities and communicate that to other groups of people to open incredible doors of opportunity. Now, what groups am I talking about to open these doors of opportunity? I'm talking about the groups of people that came up with that question. I didn't come up with this question. This question comes from the bosses, the CEOs, the corporations that don't really understand you or don't understand your generation because you're different. And the reason you're different is you're looking for something a lot more out of work than traditional workers did. You want something a lot more than just a simple transaction. You're looking for more than what I call a rental agreement. And because of that, they don't understand you. And that creates questions or skepticism. Well, I'm not sure this generation is just going to do what I tell them to do. And it creates gaps. And that's how we get all of this stuff. I've done a ton of research on this. And 1,000 articles is probably an understatement, whether it's digital, print, or television. And I'm sorry to say, if this is new to you, it's good that you see it now. And if you have seen it, I get it. It's probably a little upsetting because it's a one-way narrative. There are very few lone voices like mine out there that think differently. And all the articles say the same thing, whether it's the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, Time, Gen Z, not sure they're employable, don't have what it takes, aren't equipped for the workforce. You can see on the bottom right, they're even crossing the pond over in Britain. They're saying they're not ready either. And now the media narrative is even trying to convince that they're right by interviewing Gen Z in the workforce. And even their articles say that almost 90% of Gen Z that are in the workforce say they are not prepared. So it is definitely a one-way media narrative. And if it's frustrating or irritating, I kind of get it. As a Gen Xer, we got a fair amount of the criticism that you guys are getting, not quite as much. Gen X got a little bit. We were kind of like latchkey kids. Most of your parents are Gen Xers. Latchkey kids who grew up in the playground, dirty. We were never going to make it in business. We just weren't cut out for it. We found our way. And you guys will find your way. But I'm telling you, it is so nice to have somebody that has your back and can give you some of the inside story as to what really goes on within companies, what they're looking for. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And that's kind of the insight that I'm here to give you. So let's take this journey that I was talking about together. And the best way of explaining it is to go through the history of work. And this is an important component so that you understand how we got here, which hopefully might answer some of the questions that you guys jumped in with. And the history of modern work can best be described, it's a common analogy. All the tasks or responsibilities that you're given at work is kind of like throwing on another hat. And I'm going to do this in less than 3 minutes, which is probably something that you've never heard before, the history of work summed up that quickly. But it all started with the World War II generation, or the greatest generation. And they looked like this. They were real happy, and they had lots of hats on because they just did everything that was asked of them. And their life looked like this. It was based on survival. That's why they pretty much did everything that was asked of them. I mean, this is crazy for us to think about today. Very dangerous work, absolutely no safety gear, very little pay. They were kind of happy to just get home alive. Then came the baby boom generation. And they look like this, not as happy, not as many hats. They were pretty much just told, be quiet, do your job. And they did. And that might explain why a lot of baby boomers were so wild and crazy on the weekend. I mean, everybody's got to let loose every once in a while. And then at the tail end of their work time, this amazing thing called technology came along, and I'm still not sure they knew what to do with it. And then came along Gen X, my generation, probably the coolest generation that there ever was. Now, we did the job with attitude. We turned the hat around backwards, thus the we don't care. But the reality is we may have thought we were cool, but we were definitely not as smart as we thought we were. Then comes Gen Y or millennials. Now, we may have been confused as to what to call them, but they made work look really good. And they were also really clear as to why they worked. And there's nothing wrong with this. Money, this is the way the system was set up. They were making the best of the situation that was given to them. Now comes along Gen Z or your generation. This is what makes you different. You're not putting the hat on. It's really the first generation that says, somebody has got to tell me why you want me to do all this. And a lot of it is ridiculous, and it's all day, and it's the same thing. And I know a lot of better ways to do things. That's what creates the gaps in the skepticism by companies. So this is the what of history of work. It's equally important to understand why this is the history of work. And this is the history of work because of one word. The reason we got here is because of management. We have been breeding as a culture, as a country, have been breeding managers instead of leaders for generations. And this is the definition of management. It's the process with controlling people or things. Now, I don't know about you as a person. I don't like to be controlled, and I certainly don't like to be controlled like I'm a thing. Most people don't. But this is what companies have been doing for generations. And that's how we've gotten here. And the crazy thing is this has actually kind of worked. And it looks like this. We're not going to talk about all the layers, but this is representation, this pyramid structure of all the layers of management that just is designed to control people. And the reason it's worked is that we generate almost $4 trillion a year in annual revenue. But now we're starting to realize, especially now that you guys and Gen Z is getting into the workforce, it's not so great on our mental health. The human toll is awful. Most people think they work in a toxic environment. 70% of people say their boss has a terrible impact on their mental health. And the amazing thing is now people are leaving certain jobs to go to other jobs, and companies are realizing, wait a minute, people now have more options. I have to start actually treating them better than we've treated them. Maybe we should be treating them better than just controlling them like they're things. And you can see on the bottom right, almost half of employees today plan to leave their current job in the next year. It's changing the game. And it's forcing companies and people to think, okay, this process of just controlling people is not going to work. The next generations are not going to put up with it. The great news for you guys is this is the past. Even companies are realizing they need to do different things, different approaches, or we're going to lose lots of people. So the future looks more like this, which is this circular leadership approach. And you guys couldn't be joining the workforce at a better time. This is the future. It has nothing to do with title or position or authority. It has everything to do with the quality of character. I use the word human touch. It's not physically actually touching each other. It's the way people engage with each other. That's the difference. That's what people want to follow voluntarily. Nobody wants to follow this pyramid voluntarily. People want to follow this voluntarily. And that's the definition of leadership. And so when you think about it, the analogy that I often use is King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. And when you think about that story, they were all invited to sit together at the table as equals. King Arthur didn't sit up in the throne and just dictate orders all the time. And while he may have been the de facto leader, only his quality of character kept him as that leader. And so I'm often asked a lot, okay, I get that analogy, but what does that really look like and feel like, this human touch? Well, I was on a podcast last week, and the host of the podcast, we were talking about, okay, the thousands of examples of management and leadership you've seen, what's the best example? And he goes, I got one. 25 years ago when I was a buyer, my wife and my kids were in a horrible car accident and they almost died. And my CEO called me and he said, what can I do? I'll do anything for you. I'll hire somebody to get your groceries. I'll hire somebody to take your kids to school. I was like, that's phenomenal. That's remarkable. Yes, that's a great example of leadership. And so I shared with him the best example that I had of thousands. I wasn't even working. I was on vacation. I was training for a triathlon. Anyone know what a triathlon bike is? A triathlon? Run, swim, ride a bike. So I was training. I was probably going 30 miles an hour, and somebody was in a car and they were not paying attention and they just smashed me head on. 70-mile-an-hour collision. I almost died on the road. I should have died on the road. My kids, my wife will tell you, I still don't know how I'm alive. I was brought to the hospital. They pretty much said, you broke everything between your neck and your waist. And you punctured your lung, you lacerated your bowel. And honestly, that was the easy part. They stopped counting it like 40 fractures. The hard part was they had to reattach the entire left side of my body together, because I don't want to be too graphic, but all the muscle was no longer attached to the bone or the spine. So I felt like I was in the hospital forever. And my mom came to visit me every day. And on the 10th day, rehab wanted me to actually start to move on my own. I was like, I'm still in a full back brace. I cannot move. I was still on morphine. They're like, no, you got to start moving on your own. And guess who showed up? My boss on the 10th day showed up for a surprise visit to support me. Gave my mom a hug he had never met, gave me a hug. And I remember them sitting on the far wall, and PT wanted me to actually get up and move. And I cannot explain the amount of pain that I was in. And my boss took my mom's hand and said, Audrey, let's go for a walk. That is the mark of a great leader. They went and walked for about a half an hour, and he let me do whatever I needed to do, as painful and as much as I was suffering. And I did it. I did what therapy wanted me to do. And then they came back in, I was resting in bed, and he gave my mom a hug. And then he gave me a hug, and he said, Erica, talk to your wife. I know you don't want to be discarded, and you won't. He's like, I don't care how long it takes. You're going to get better. Don't worry about your job. Don't worry about your team. I've got everything. And then he pretty much left. And he was twice as good as his word. I never worried about my job. I wasn't the same for about a year. I wasn't even half the leader I was for about a year. And he was still patient with me. All he cared about was helping me get better and get back to where I was before. Not because I was making money for him, because he truly knew it was best for me and the people around me. That's the mark of a great leader. And so he's a baby boomer. But if I put a generation in the center of this leadership structure and the type of personality that it takes to demonstrate that kind of great leadership, I put Gen Z in the middle of that leadership model. The model that doesn't care about hierarchy, position, or power, just how we relate to each other. And why do I do this? Do you care about people? And that you're a little skeptical as a generation, which to me is a mark of a great leader. It's because of these values. These values are the ones that are most important to you. And the ones that are, it's just crazy. 92% authenticity and genuineness. Gen Z values authenticity 2 to 3 times more than you value money. Everybody needs or values money, but that's not what's important to you. You value honesty, reliability, and this one word called commitment. 73% might look low. That is off the charts. No other generation had that word anywhere as any of their answers. And we'll talk a little bit about why that is important. And the way to do that is to continue this journey so that you really understand and connect the dots between where you are now and where you're going. So I'm not going to tell you, this isn't to tell you what you already know. I already know you know this. This is the way I would imagine your environment feels today. In college or at Hudson Valley, it feels encouraging, empowering, supportive. These are all comments from Gen Z students. It's all about growth, helping you learn, helping you experiment, and broaden your horizons. Now, the truth and the reality is when you exit Hudson Valley or college and you enter the workforce, which is what I call the next adventure in your life, it will feel a lot like this. You meet great people, you'll be involved in great projects. There will be people around you that help you learn. However, the reality is there is a darker side to the business world. And it doesn't matter who you work for. If you work for somebody in any industry, there is a component to this. It's what I call the alter ego side to business. And it often looks like this. And the reason it looks like this is that a lot of times in the business world, you constantly feel like there's somebody looking over your shoulder. And you're being asked to do the same thing every day for 8 hours. And you're like, I know there's a better way and I can do this in half the time and nobody's listening. And the reason why it feels like this is because your boss is designed to be very different. Going back to the why, the boss is designed to be very different than your teacher, professors, your parents, or your fellow students. They're designed to do one thing and one thing only at their core, his or her core. They're designed to keep making money. Doing things the way that they've known makes money in the past. And that's kind of the role. And that's why it feels like I'm being micromanaged all the time. They're essentially paying you to do it their way, to not, I use the word muck things up, And that's why, honestly, it often feels like you're rolling this huge boulder uphill. I've got all these great ideas and nobody's listening. So this is what it feels like, and this is kind of why it feels like this. It's important to equally understand a little bit of the pressures and the stress of bosses, CEOs, and managers so that this fully makes sense. And the stress and the pressure is pretty significant. It is a lot harder and more stressful to make money as a CEO or as a boss than an employee. I never really understood that until I had 30 years in business. I'll give you an example. If you woke up tomorrow and I told you had to take out a $10 million loan, how many of you would freak out? I'd freak out. I think we'd all freak out. Make it worse. Let's say, you know what, you got to take out a $10 million loan and you've got 50. No, actually, let's say you have 1,000 employees. And if that $10 million loan doesn't pan out, all those 1,000 employees lose their job. You'd probably freak out again. That's why there's so much pressure and stress at the top, and it pushes all the way down to every level, including the employee. So the pressure, the stress, and the consequences are different. That's why all this stuff feels like that. This is all true. There is another truth to the business world when you leave Hudson Valley, which might be the biggest truth, which is outside of money and productivity. Companies have been trying to do now for almost a decade that comes naturally to Gen Z. And I can tell you this as fact. Companies are really struggling. They can really do one thing very well, and that's about it. The rest of the things that they're trying to do, they're not very good at. And they don't seem to understand why. And to me, that's the incredible irony. I know the solution to that, and it's sitting right here in the room, and they don't understand that. That's the incredible irony. You guys can actually, as Gen Z, as a generation, could get companies what they want, and I can prove it. And I prove it by doing this. And this is a ton of evidence taken. And if you look at what companies want, their criticism of you guys are your values. We're going to put aside the values for a minute and just look at wants. This is what companies want. They want 4 things. They want profitability, purpose, customer satisfaction, health, sustainability, and they want skilled and motivated employees. Those are the 4 things they really want. You know what's fascinating? It's the same thing that Gen Z wants. I mean, the words might be a little bit different, but that's kind of semantics. As a generation, you guys really want the same things: financial security, meaningful and purpose work. You want health, mental and physical health, and you want advancement and growth. The irony is that companies historically, and I know this is fact, after being there for 30 years, this is a generalization, so not every company, it's maybe like 96% of companies only know how to do one thing right, and that's profitability and growth. The other 3 things, excuse my language, they suck at. They don't know how to do those 3 other things because they all involve the human element. And it's amazing. The problem that they're having is their own values don't get them what they want. This, again, is taken from a ton of literature. These are their values. They value achievement, process, the grinding workload. You ask any company, any CEO, they'll tell you the same thing. Learn it our way, and brand reputation and loyalty. But let me tell you what, those values have never gotten them those 3 wants in yellow, and 100 years from now, they will never get them the 3 other things that they want. What gets them what they want? Whose values get them what they want? Gen Z's values get them what they want. That's the incredible irony, is that you guys can deliver I look at this as like the keys to the kingdom. Authenticity, genuineness, transparency, work-life balance. People can actually work for more than a month before they feel like they have to quit because they're burnt out. A little honesty, reliability. This thing called empowerment, letting people do what they do best, and a little bit of diversity of thought and approach. You guys, your generation gives companies a direct line to what they want. If they can understand this, I'm not sure that you can put a price tag on that. So the question is, how do you do that? How do you convince these groups of people and these companies that you can do that? Well, it's taken me 30 years to figure this out. And this is how you do that. These are what I call the 5 pillars of great leadership. They're in the book. They're the commonalities of all great leaders. Now, great leaders might have other traits or abilities, but every great leader has these 5 commonalities. I call them the pillars, and they hold up, we were talking about before, this circular leadership model. And I know you might look at them and say, oh, there's such common sense though. 5 words: belief, a little humanity, awareness. No, they're not common sense. I can prove it too. They can't be, because we wouldn't have toxic work. We wouldn't have toxic bosses. Everybody at work would feel respected and valued, but we're way away from that. So it's not common sense. The reason it feels like common sense is that we're all born with these abilities. We're all born with the innate capabilities to demonstrate these. We're also born with the opposing pole. When money, stress, and pressure get in the way, it's just a lot easier for me to dictate. Same thing with being a parent. It's a lot easier to just tell my kids, do this, X, Y, and Z, when time, pressure, and money gets in the way, rather than me showing a little bit of humanity. So the point here is to help people understand and how to be reminded of these things when the time, stress, and pressure come. And the best way to do that is through stories. So I use a story, and you don't have to remember all this too, because it's in the book. It's Lord of the Rings, and the characters in Lord of the Rings that best demonstrate each one of these pillars. And that is the power of the guardian. And by showing the guardian and helping somebody get stronger at what they're good at and protecting them when they're most vulnerable, that is how you make belief happen. And when you do that in your life, by demonstrating the guardian, you help others accomplish their belief. And then what do you think happens? Well, what happens is that they end up helping you accomplish your belief. And that's the full circle of the 5 pillars. I hope that the talk today and our time together has kind of connected the dots. By taking the noble leadership 5 pillars and what Hudson Valley is helping you with and learning and growing, I'm hoping that you're seeing a whole lot more than just whether you're employable. And I believe this. I don't believe Gen Z, whether you're employable or not, is the big enough question. I don't think it's even close to the big enough question. Honestly, to me, it's a much bigger picture. And it's because I've seen the impact that one leader can have on somebody. I've seen it, I felt it. I bet if you think about it in your own life, the impact that one leader has on you is significant. It's game-changing. It's life-changing. And I have a vision, a dream of a whole generation of great leaders, what work would look like, what life would look like. And I believe this. I believe that it starts, I see it in my own life. I believe it starts with Gen Z. It starts with your generation. And so I challenge you, when you leave here, I do hope that you believe in your greatness, that you continue to have the humanity to care for others, that you develop the wisdom to help others find the path that can't find it, the awareness to help people see that can't, and be the guardian to help people grow and protect them when they're vulnerable. You do these 5 things. Again, I don't think your employability is even remotely the right question. I think the right question is how much you can actually change the world and for how long. Thank you.